Hallelujah. Okay, we're going to do our vision and mission statements. Our vision, to be the best training and evangelistic ministry in the world. What kind of place is this? A progressive center of attraction exists. Jesus, help us, Lord. Our mission, center of attraction, exists for the purpose of glorifying the name of Jesus through worship, Christian discipline, and the proclaiming of the gospel. What kind of place is this? A progressive and prosperous place. A place of worship to our God, an apostolic and prophetic place, a place of community and international outreach, a place exploding in growth. And what did Jesus say in John 12:32? And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. So what we're going to do today, we're going to lift him up, lift him up, lift Jesus up. Oh, yes, Lord. Oh, yes, Lord. Hallelujah. We got to lift up the name of Jesus, the name above all names, the name every knee shall bow and every tongue confess. Jesus Christ is Lord. Jesus Christ reigns. That's what Lord means. Jesus Christ reigns in your life. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And no one gets to the Father but through him. Hallelujah. We just thank him and praise him. Yes, Lord. Our scripture today is going to be found in Psalms 34. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul shall make her boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear thereof and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and delivered me from all my fears. They looked unto him and were lightened, and their faces were not ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamped around about them that fear him and delivered them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him. Hallelujah. 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 All our trust is in God. We can just give it to God and get our hands off of it and let him take care of the situation. That's what we do. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Praise God. He is worthy. He is worthy to be praised. I don't know about you, but I come to get my praise on and get God magnified, exalted, exuberated in my life. So I know that when I have something like Jesus in me, I know I'm more than a conqueror. Yes. Thank you, Lord. You are worthy. You are worthy to be good. Hallelujah. And we thank him this morning. Amen. Let's give God a big shout out. Hallelujah. Yes. We just bless him at all times. Amen. When we think that we can't get through, we call on the name of Jesus. Jesus will make a way when there can't be no way. Jesus will do that. You know why? Because he loves us just that much. That he cares about us just that much. He don't want to see us suffering. He don't want to see us just getting
feel sincerely fired up today. Although my throat can't agree with me, I'm still going to press through in the name of Jesus. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I can do all things.
God for. Just say to the Lord right now, I believe. What's the difficult situation? What's the ever-present problem? Lift that heart of faith to the Lord today and tell him, I believe. Mark 9:23 says, if you can believe, all things are possible. Say, all things are possible.
All things are possible.
If I believe.
If I believe.
I am a believer. Say,
I am a believer.
and therefore today, I will receive.
I will receive.
Mark 11:22 says, have faith in God, or have the God kind of faith. We don't see it yet. It's insurmountable. But the faith of God says you can address any mountain, any monumental thing by faith. Have the God kind of faith. We need to be focused with our faith. Say with me, focus faith. Our mind is not everywhere or somewhere. Our mind is right there. As an arrow of faith to address the impossible situation. Say with me, all things are possible.
All things are possible.
With God.
With God.
Because I believe in God.
I believe in God.
Now those that are watching, those who are here today, God, we thank you. Focus now on that thing that wakes you up at night, that thing that weighs on you throughout the day, that thing that doesn't want to lift yet in your body, in your mind, in your finances, in your relationships. Focus your faith this morning like an arrow and shoot the target for your success. Right now, while I pray, Father, those viewing, those here, there is no other virtue that pleases you but faith. So God, help our unbelief if there is unbelief. Let us believe no matter what, no matter the sense realm, no matter the physical fact. Let us, with our faith in you, believe to be that overcomer. Believe to receive what you have given to us through Christ. We thank you for this privilege. We thank you for this opportunity right now. These songs today reminds us that in our day of dismay and despair and discouragement, in doubt and unbelief and fear, you said we must still believe. Grace us with a measure of belief we did not have before. Help us, Lord God, in this. Measure out the faith that we need, Lord God. Even as we study your word, and even as we embrace your truth, let that truth now set us free. In Jesus' name.
And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what could stand against? And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what could stand against?
And if our God is for us, and who could
hear our request, our petition. We stand in your presence today knowing that you are the great I am. Is there anything too hard for you to do? There's nothing too hard for you, God. Our confidence, our hope, our trust, our dependence is upon you this morning. We will remain unmovable so that we can abound in the things of God. We will neither turn to the left or to the right, but our face is like a flint towards you. Now heal us this morning from disappointment. Heal us this morning from disappointments and discouragement. Will you now revive us again this morning and renew our strength, oh God? We stand confident in you. We stand confident in you. Say it, I stand confident in God. I am unmovable. I am abounding. I am increasing in the things of God. That which concerns my purpose, I declare it today. I live by faith and not by sight. I'm a faith walker, a faith talker, a faith liver, and a faith speaker. Every day I speak faith. Every day I look at my dream. And my dream is looking back at me. And today is the best day that I can live. And I'm living it large. I'm living it in my increase. Come on, praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. I will remain. so happy, so free. Do you see yourself with the victory in our soul? For the Lord has given you better wings than angels. He's given you eagle's wings, and you may fly high. Somebody say, I'm a high flyer. Hallelujah. For when the storms come, the eagles have the ability to fly above the storm. Hallelujah. Say, devil, you can't touch this. But you can't handle this. Hallelujah. Victory is mine. Say it. Victory is mine. In the name of Jesus. Come on, praise the Lord like you already do.
Hallelujah. You know, Pastor, when you were saying that, I heard it very clearly. The Lord has given you eagle wings. The Lord has given you change the music on the floor on me. Eagle wings. Go back to what you were playing for. The Lord has given you eagle wings. The Lord is giving you eagle wings. So why don't you fly? Why don't you fly?
message before the message. You get my point? God has already spoken. Before I can get up and speak. Doesn't mean I still won't speak. But there is a prophetic word in the house. God is saying, the Holy One, Yod-Heh-Vav. I am Moses that I am. Tell them that when you go to this God of this earth. Pharaoh, tell them that. I am have sent you. Trying to get that job, I am is with you. Impossibility is talking to you. This is the message of God. He's saying, where is your faith? Listen to me. Faith has no boundaries. Faith can never be in captivity. You can never block faith. You can never limit faith. Faith is limitless. When you say, God, I'm believing you for this, God says, well, how come you can't believe me for this? Okay, God, I'm going to believe you for this. And he says, well, how come you can't believe me for this? How immeasurable, innumerable, how eternal is this virtue of faith? And God says, I've given you the necessary measure to handle impossibilities in your life. Somebody said enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
We're too confident staying in the boat. The boat of comfortability. It's time, y'all, to get out the boat. My nephews, get out the boat. Get out the boat. Well, that's risky. So what? What do you think faith is? Faith is never comfortable. Let me help you with something here. I'm believing God. Faith is never comfortable. Because you're bringing the supernatural virtue of God into a natural situation, and the fight is immediate. There's a struggle. Today you're all excited, yes, I'm going to challenge my impossibility, and tomorrow you wake up and say, maybe tomorrow. I don't want to do this today. I ain't get enough sleep. I didn't take my medication yet. I didn't, whatever the excuse. Come on, y'all. Who am I talking to? Lastly, let me say, because God gave this to me, focus faith. We're believing for so many things, and I'm hearing the Lord say to us, come on, focus in, line in on what you really want. Because that's when you put all of your attention, all of your resources, all of your mind, all of your imagination on that thing. Our faith increases when our imagination broadens. And if we don't ever have time and space in our day to just sit back, relax, turn off systems and things, and begin to imagine greater things, and talk to God about your limitations, and say, God, how can I get out of my limitations into the great grandness of who you are? Some of us were fighting generational spirits that don't want to let you go. So you have to make up your mind and be focused on this thing. You hear me tonight? Nothing's going to deter me. I will remain confident in what my promise is to God. God on my side. I am not moving towards victory, I'm moving from victory. To achieve, to accomplish, I'm talking to myself with you. What God has called me to. Somebody say enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
You got to get sick and tired of you. Sick and tired of you. I'm tired of living like this, dressing like this. I'm tired I can't even bend down to pick nothing up if it's on the floor. I'm tired of it. Penny pinching my way through the week. I'm tired of it. Got to think 2 or 3 thoughts before you purchase something. Well, if you're living in the overflow, you don't think at all. You just buy it. You just do it. Well, you see, if we go to Olive Garden today, that means that we can't be. Now, you have to be good stewards over the little you got. But your focus ain't on where you are, it's where you're going. And you say to God one day, Shayoba, I can do freely without thinking and double thinking and plotting and planning just to go to McDonald's. Sometimes you gotta, I'm done with this, you can go on to because I'll keep listen now. That's right, I'm eating up my message. But let me share this with you now. You got to get sick and tired of where you are. You're going to have to open your eyes and see where you really are. Don't worry about coveting someone else's property and who they are. Because God has a plan for you, Jeremiah 29:11. Hallelujah. You're looking at a determined man. All the hell we went through in ministry. Why are you still in ministry? I'm determined after 30-something years, I'm still determined. You're not going to change that. You have to look at today. Listen to the Holy Ghost. You have to look at today something about your life that's been a thorn in your flesh. You got to say enough is enough. Now God, if you haven't answered any other prayer, answer this one. Help me out of this. And you keep bugging God in a sense every day and keep yourself focused and determined and say, we ain't going to live like this all the time. I made up my mind. I ain't going to drive like this all the time. And I made up my mind, so I ain't driving like this all the time. Well, my muffler falling, I got to get underneath my car and wire it up and hope I get to work and hope. Enough is it. Y'all understand what I'm saying? Where is your faith? God ain't coming back for a poor, broke, busted, disgusted church. And we the church, we ain't talking about building. Hallelujah, say. And here's the sad thing. Some of you don't know not one wealthy person in your family. Not one. Wealthy. Not struggling like you. I don't want to deal with men. Solomon said, money answers all things. And for all of us, that's the major issue right now. God is trying to get our faith to the level where he can trust us with more. But you're going to have to be faithful where you are, a good steward where you are. Amen. And discipline, because why should God give you something more to be undisciplined over? Y'all hearing the Holy Ghost here today? Because we're moving on up.
Yes.
I'm telling you. You don't have to fight. I don't care.
Yes.
I'm already determined.
Yes.
You got to get sick and tired of your crap lifestyle. You got to move over this furniture to get to that one. And then one day you got to say, you know what? I'm tired of this. Give me a bedroom where I can have a sitting area over here and down so long, we don't even know how to get up. Amen. We've gone through so much in life. We've gone through so much in life, and the wind is out of your sail. You don't want to sail anymore. I hear the Holy Ghost saying as I'm prophesying to you now, the Lord says, one more time. One more time. Can you give me one more time? Let me stand your feet and say, yes, Lord. One more time. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I feel this is one lady getting ready to move right now.
I heard the Lord say, even before Apostle spoke, that he said, rise and be healed.
Yeah.
He said, be healed in the name of Jesus. Then he had to stand for prosperity. But I heard God say he was dealing with the debt of sin. He was dealing with the debt of poverty. Because Jesus went to the cross to die for all of it. He bore our sin and our sickness. He bore poverty on the cross. And with his stripes we're healed. Healing is the children's bread. Deliverance is the children's bread. It belongs to us. I don't know why you sit there. You should have got up. Do you want to be made whole? Do you want to be made whole? Do you want to be made whole? I've been here a long time. I've been here a long time. I've been here a long time. I got one question for you. I got one question for you. Do you want to get up? 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 Do you want to get up out of that situation? And he's not talking about what people have done to you. How somebody done blocked me and shooting got me and I ain't got no prayer, but God say, do you want to get up? Do you want to get up? You gotta get up. You gotta press past your feelings. You gotta press past what you feel, what you see. The pain going through your back. The pain going through your knee. And you say, enough is enough. Enough is enough. The devil trying to convince you that you ain't gonna get no better. So when I was sitting in the back, when I came in, I heard music in the back. When the praise team was singing, I believe, I sat down, I heard a new song. When I walked in the pulpit, I kept hearing different songs. Kept on hearing. Every time the floor played something, I heard a new song. And God said, sing what I give you, and I'll do what I said I'll do. God said he's gonna do what he said he's gonna do. God said he's gonna do what he said he's gonna do. Somebody say
This morning we had a financial seminar. We got it going on. So I got it going on. I got it. Please receive it. Hallelujah. Don't you love the Lord? Hallelujah. My.
Yes. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. We're going to have the operation of the gifts. You heard something this morning or sensed in your spirit, but God has placed in there your spirit. You can come right to the podium here and enhance God people what you have heard from the Lord.
Okay, well, I'm kind of full, so I hope I make sense. I sense that a lot of you came here today with expectation. You came here ready to receive and looking for something from God. And I feel like as a church, we received another level of authority. I feel like we came expecting, and that was here today, and that's what we received. When we were closing our eyes and we were thinking about, what it was that we could picture ourselves having, what we were believing for, I imagined myself with all of my children and grandchildren all surrounding me, just with complete love and adoration. Like there was so much love for one another, a very godly love for one another. It was like you could almost taste it. It was so thick. And I felt like in that place that I was imagining that even anybody that's ever crossed my path, like my children's friends, like they were powerless to the love of God. Like anybody that even walked past or we had anything to do with, I felt like they were instantly just awed and sucked into that love, God's love. And I feel like that's a level of authority that I received today, and I believe we received it as a church. And I just want to say to Apostle, if I can, you look like money. When I look at him today, I see the kingdom. And I feel like with the authority that I have as a daughter of the King, that I can declare that for Apostle. I declare money to Apostle, not for his own selfish gain, but for the kingdom. So I have that authority as a daughter of the King. So I declare money, wealth, growth, financial freedom, and it's because he can be trusted. It's for the kingdom. And in doing that, it's going to come right back to me. So I give glory and honor to the King. Thank you, guys.
Good morning. Good morning. The first thing I heard the Lord say as the song was going forth this morning, "Oh, taste and see." This is Psalms 34:8. "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him." I'm telling you, if we trust in God, how much blessings do we have in him? Just taste and see. Just begin to trust him. He wants you to trust him. Put your faith in him. The other thing that I heard as prophetess and apostle was dancing and prophets began to go forth, the Lord said, how long the water is troubled and you do not jump in? How long will you wait when the water was troubled, you did not jump in? How long should you wait when the water is troubled and you didn't jump in? Why are you waiting? Your blessing was there. It was open. The water was troubled for you to jump in. And some of us didn't jump. Some of us didn't even grab hold. Some of us didn't do anything. We just watched, spectators. Just like the man that was laying at the side waiting to be put into the water. He waited and waited. But others was jumping in. Instead of him getting up off his bed and jumping
just was singing, we were unstoppable. The Lord impressed upon me that we're unstoppable because He's unstoppable and because His love is unstoppable. And so the word, I found Romans 5 that says, and hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. And Romans chapter 5 verse 8 says that, but God shows His love towards us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And so what God was impressing upon me was that His love would never ever stop chasing you. In the end, you will never be able to look Him in the face and say, God, you didn't pursue me. He says, I am pursuing you with an everlasting love, and I will honor your choice to reject that love or to accept my love. So if you've been running from me, says the Lord, I am chasing you, and I will never quit, for I love you so much, says the Lord.
What I heard when we were praising, it says, I heard the Lord say, I am that I am. Whoever you need me to be, that's who I am. I am is working and moving in and through you. Get in me, move with me, and I will take you where I want you to go. Remain in me, and I remain in you. I am will get you to that goodness.
Praise the Lord. I heard God say to the church, that measure of faith that I have given you is increasing. God says, do not be complacent at the place you are. When as the word of the Lord came forth today, the truth of God says, next level of faith. That's what I heard God say.
Next level of faith.
Praise the Lord. We're going to have our announcements now. Let's greet our announcer.
Praise the Lord. These are our announcements. Food giveaway open to all Wednesday, July 17th at 12 noon. Helps Ministry training will be July 20th at 11 a.m. Assembly business meeting Sunday, July 14th. That's today, in case no one knows. Following service. Fast and prayer every Wednesday at 6 United Prayer. Tell someone about Jesus and invite them to church. Special thanks to all of you. To know you is to know people who are kind, considerate, and thoughtful. To know you is to be grateful for the special things you do. For everything you've done, for being the special people that you are. Thank you so very much. We love you all. The Keys family, Scepters, Prayers, Monters, Thomas, Max family. This is from Sister Bertha's family. Praise God.
Amen.
Do we have any first-time visitors today? Please stand. Give us your name, church home, if you have one. Thank you for attending today. Who invited you? Amen.
All right.
Yes. Amen. May I have your name?
Jerome.
And who invited you? You have a church home? Okay, welcome. We're glad you came to work with us. We are back in the hands of the pulpit.
Praise the Lord. Amen. It's offering time. Hallelujah. Yeah. Offering time. You need an envelope, just raise your hand, and one of the ushers will be sure to get you an envelope. Amen? Yes. Get that envelope in your hands and get ready to This morning for what has been received to you, Lord. We thank you and bless the ones who give, Lord. You said you love a cheerful giver. We give it cheerfully, not grudgingly or out of necessity, for you love a cheerful giver. Lord, bless those who give. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
This has also reminded me about the Key family and their loss, and that we wanted to make a contribution to the family. I don't really want to share anything that transpired. You can't say you're a loving church and not be loving, and so this is an expression of that.
Amen. Yes. Just a few of us went down Friday to some food because we get the opportunity to call people. So we're going to give you an opportunity today if you will give an offering, whatever amount you want to give, and this will go to the Key family. All the Keys stand up. The relatives of the Keys, all the Keys stand up. Okay, there's a lot of them. Amen. They're all on the praise team. They help in church. So this is a big family. We're going to give this offering today. They can go out and buy food. The loss of her brother, her oldest brother, who was 75. I think his obituary is in the fellowship hall. We put it in for you to read. So I'm going to start off with $3 $6 bills. That's the bills. $2.85. Well, they're blessed bills. They're $2 bills. So come up and give, yes. Yeah. Come up and be a blessing to them. They give food to eat.
Also, while you're doing that, please, our nursery is available and open for your little persons 1 to 4, our kids zone, as we call it. Amen. Hallelujah.
And we'll give it to Mother Bertha, and she'll do whatever she wants with it for the food for the family. There was a lot of people there to eat Friday. If I had known that many people would come, we would have brought more food.
Thank you. God bless you.
Bless it again in Jesus' name. Let the multiply and begin this benevolence to our loved ones who are faithful at this church. We can't say we care and not show we care. So let them know that we care for them and we love them. And we're praying for them and that God will comfort their hearts through this time of grief and bereavement in Jesus' name. And if you got someone that is passed in the family, you got to let us know, right? So that was a restaurant funeral last week because they had their family reunion, so that was double duty on them. And I was informed by Melissa, Ms. Baker, that another one of your brothers died. So we'll talk to you later about what food you would like. She'd like me to make tuna casserole. I'll make her tuna casserole. But let's make sure we find out if we got a loved one passing, okay?
Amen. Hallelujah. Let's pray, Father. We do ask that you would honor this word. Bless it for the sake of the hearers. We know it's already blessed, and now do it so now for us in this time and in this hour and season that we're in. We're talking about the supernatural gifts of the Holy Spirit. Thank you for, God bless you. Thank God for our praise team too. Let me just say that we just appreciate you flowing with the Spirit. All right. Some people have issues with that. I understand that. I came from that world. If it's not in the script, why are we doing it? But you learn that the blessings of the Holy Spirit can certainly enrich us like none other, and we need to be very open and very sensitive to the flow of the Holy Spirit. So thank you for flowing with Prophetess and I all these Sundays, and you know how we do it. Because we want to do it, we believe, the way God wants it done. We're talking about the supernatural gifts of the Holy Spirit, and we're still in this session and succession of thoughts and revelation concerning the gifts. As I shared on other occasions, it's important that we need to understand that we're all gifted. We're all gifted by the Spirit of God. If the Holy Spirit has infilled you, you receive the baptism of the Holy Spirit, then you need to understand that the Holy Spirit has also gifted you and infruited you, if I can say it that way. And so we're not talking about the fruit of the Spirit right now, but the gifts of the Holy Spirit. We are all in the class of the supernatural gifts. And what I mean by that is that as we obey the Spirit begins to teach us how to move and flow in His particulars. And the particulars I'm referring to are the 9 particular gifts of the Holy Spirit. We are a Spirit-led, a Spirit-bred, a Spirit-filled church, which infers some things. And so it automatically infers that we allow the Holy Spirit in operation when we corporately come together, and we don't relegate the power of the Holy Spirit only to a handful of people that's on the platform, etc. But we all can enter into the flow of the Holy Spirit with His gifts. We need to do better with that here because we're at a level that I think personally we shouldn't be at or remain at. We need to allow the gifts to flow. Now, we are prophetic, and we appreciate that you allow the word of the Lord to flow through you to encourage, to exhort, to build up, and to comfort. But there's more gifts than just one in operation. And so we need to make sure that the Holy Spirit has His way, and that way being in the vocal, revelatory, and the power gifts. Can someone say amen? Amen. So the reason for this teaching and for this succession of teachings for us to keep hearing the word, because faith comes by the hearing of God's word. And so we're going to keep at this until you begin to operate in this. Amen. In greater measures, in greater degrees. We are not to compare or compete with other spiritual activities that another member of the body of Christ is operating in. We need to be very confident in that which God is flowing through us to do. And it is for the purpose of all of us being a better unit of people once the operation of the gifts has functioned and the result thereof. Are you hearing what I'm saying? So we don't want to come to the house of God in this particular house and have things be as they were, or we come here one way and we stay the same way and we leave here the same way. The Holy Spirit is the change agent that causes the changing, the altering, and the bettering of each and every one of us when we come into this corporate assembly under the auspices of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. And so here we are again talking about the supernatural gifts of the Spirit, and we broke it down in threes. The vocal gifts, which are the tongues, the interpretation of tongues, and prophecy. We also said revelation. You can take notes on the backside of your bulletin. The revelation gifts, the word of knowledge, the word of wisdom, the discerning of spirits, and the power gifts. The gift of faith, the working of miracles, the gifts of healing. So last week we talked about the vocal gifts, which primarily manifested by saying something. We started with the gift of tongues, which is a supernatural utterance in a language never learned and usually not understood by the speaker or the listener. The text came from 1 Corinthians 14, 6 to 8, and verses 22 to 28, tongues. And then also the interpretation of those spiritual tongues. And it is when a person supernaturally receives the meaning of the utterance of tongues. Now those tongues can be the tongues of men or of angels. The tongues of men is Chinese, is Italian, it's Ebonics. No, I'm just kidding. It is the different language of ethnicity groups and nationalities. And then there is a tongue of angels, which means that there is no tongue on this earth, but it comes from heaven. Someone asked me today, well, I didn't know that angels have tongues. That's just a substitute term to mean it comes from heaven. And the reference is from the Old Testament. Remember, it said that it was the food of angels. What were they talking about? They were talking about manna coming from God, coming from heaven. It's a terminology that means that it comes from God, not so much directly an angel, all right? It's a figure of speech. So, tongues of men and of angels. and the interpretation of those tongues. And then we ended with prophecy, and I'm going to add a few more thoughts on that today. Prophecy is a supernatural utterance in an known language that speaks for God and is both spontaneous and timely, coming from 1 Corinthians 14, particularly, and then Acts 21, verses 8 to 11, which we will now read. This is not the office of a prophet. Listen to me, please. The gift of prophecy, God gives you spontaneously for a people, for a time, for a moment, maybe a season. The office of the prophet is a governmental position. It is the person's life. It is that anointing that rests on him or her indefinitely. You understand? It is the prerogative of Christ Jesus, according to Ephesians chapter 4. All right? And this person that is in this office, it could be called a gift because Ephesians 4 says it's an ascension gift. But it is an ascension gift given by Jesus, his prerogative to choose that person, and that person begins to move into that office by experience, by training, by being in the presence of the Lord, by jumping through hoops, so to speak, going through suffering, going through all kinds of things. You study the Old Testament prophet, you know what I'm talking about, as well as the New Testament prophets. But they get to a place where they're now in that office and they're functioning. They don't need a 3x5 car. They don't need anything to broadcast who they are. That is their life. They breathe prophecy. They breathe this office. It is who they are. You can't tear them from it. The office of the prophet is different than the gift that God has given spontaneously to that person to prophesy. We need to say this because there is a need, there is an understanding, so to speak, that people have. Because you are flowing regularly in this gift, you must be a prophet. That person does not have discernment. That person does not understand structure, order, or longevity, or genuineness, a whole lot of things that person doesn't understand. Basically ignorant about the discriminative differences between the gift of prophecy and the office of a prophet. Let me also say this, that we need to understand that every gift, like every area dealing with the believer, is operated by faith. Say, by faith. By faith. You can't operate the gifts without faith. Without faith. Because faith is the fuel. Faith is the foundation, the launching pad. Faith is all of that and more. That's right. Faith in God, not faith that you can do it. I believe I can do this. No, you're not that source. Okay, if it is the gift of the Holy Spirit, then you need faith in God, the Holy Spirit, to operate through you. Amen. And so according to Mark 11:22, it has to be the faith of God. Mark 9:23, it is impossible. It says, that's Hebrew, Mark 9:23 says, if thou canst believe, all things are possible with him that believe. You say, I don't know if I can flow in the gifts of the Lord. Believe God, and you will flow in the gifts of the Spirit. Amen. Somebody says by faith. By faith. All right. So let's then continue to talk about prophecy just for a moment before we go into the revelation gifts and close on that today, because I want to talk about just very briefly what the response should be concerning prophecy that's given to you. Now, what we believe, because we've been taught this, we don't believe in parking lot prophets, prophecy. We don't believe in backroom and bathroom prophecies. We believe that if God is saying something to you for someone, that it should be checked. It should be checked. It should be in a time, a place, a venue where possibly other prophets are there, that leadership of that house and that venue is there. If that's not the case, then it should be recorded and therefore brought to your leadership to be judged. So what to expect from prophetic ministry? It is edification, exhortation, comfort. It is not direction or correction. It is the realm of the gift of prophecy, of edification, exhortation, and comfort. Not direction, not correction. That lies exclusively to the office of the prophet. So you have to be careful with that. A team is assigned to you. It says here in this protocol that will minister this prophetic team the heart of God, and that should be done with love. We talked a little bit about that in Sunday school, all right, in the last couple of sessions, how that faith works by love, and we discovered that the gifts operate also by love. So if you're taking notes, they operate by faith and the behavior and attitude of love. The power, the virtue, the underpinning of faith, and the attitude and the behavior of love that also comes from the Spirit. As you go to Galatians 5:22-23, the gifts, the fruit, not fruits, plural, one fruit. This is the fruit of Christ Jesus, dissected in 9 portions. Love is how you need to operate the gifts. If not, you will operate the gifts in your flesh, in what you think it should be, how it should sound, and etc. Amen. And God is not pleased with anybody's flesh. And we're not talking about this flesh, all right, your skin of your body. We're talking about that unregenerate nature of man that is unsubmitted to God and His perfect will. Thirdly, you need to record. How do you respond to prophecy? You should record it. You get your iPhone, you get your Android, whatever, and you begin to record. If you don't have that, amen. If you still have flip phones, you're not in the Spirit, and you're not in the Holy Ghost. You're not in the Spirit. You got to have faith. So you want to record it. Why? Well, for obvious reasons. You want to record it to be judged by your leadership, an elder brother and elder sister in the faith, in the way a good while, a person of that caliber, all right? And you need to have it so that it can be part and parcel to your devotion, so that when you're worshiping God and you're petitioning supplication or whatever you're doing, that you go, God, you said, and you begin to put yourself first person. I am, because God said that, all right? Because you do understand, if you say it this way, God, you said that I will be this, and this, it's almost pushing it into the future, and the truth is you can never have tomorrow turn into today. Because you're always pushing it out there. And faith is now, faith is. See, faith is now. Say it, faith is now. So that also pertains to prophecy. And there's a couple other pointers that I'm not going to share with you at this time. There is one more, and that is the war with the word. War with the word. Can I get 1 Timothy 1:18, please? War with the word. Declare it daily. As I said, make it first person. And then we're going to go to Luke 8:15. First 1 Timothy 1:18, please. And then Luke 8:15, and then we'll move to the Revelation gifts. It says here in the 18th verse, this charge Paul is speaking to his son in ministry, I commit unto you Timothy, according to the prophecies which went before on thee, that thou by them, by the prophecies, mightest war a good warfare. Why? Look at me for a moment. As soon as God speaks, the devil will follow suit and speak. That's why. Have you noticed when the Lord says, I need you to give so-and-so this, and you're so happy, and then the next voice says, no, but you can't do that because. So the charge, the commission, you heard by a prophet to be such and such, Timothy. Now what Paul is saying between those lines is this, Timothy, I want you to be aware that your adversary, the devil, is going to come and try to convince you otherwise. So war with this word. Now how do you war with this word? You constantly reciting it in your devotional time.
That's right. Amen.
Or whatever day, or time of day. When the thought comes, yes, God, you said, therefore I am. You said, therefore I am. Thank you, Jesus. You're warring with thanksgiving. You're warring with the prophecy, with your declarations of faith. Amen.
Amen.
And Luke 8:15, please. In Luke 8:15, but that on the good ground are they which in an honest and good heart, having heard the word, keep it, see, and bring forth fruit with patience. So, you heard the word, you keep the word. Look at me. How do you keep the word? You keep the word by keeping it in your remembrance. How do you keep it in your remembrance? By constantly speaking the word. Then you will keep it in your remembrance. This is what I said by the Holy Spirit earlier today in service, how that you need to focus your faith. The reason we have not arrived yet, having come to that level, that measure, that increase in our life, is because we have soon forgotten due to distractions and disturbances in our life, and we're not disciplined and focused on what we first believed God for. So we dropped the ball. I said we dropped the ball. But we're determined people. We're not going to drop the ball. We got our eyes on the prize. Amen. We're going to be what God said and His Word says. Proceeding word. What is He saying now to me? Based on what He said yesterday. Line upon line. Precept upon precept. And that's what prophecy is. Now, going back to, please, the former scripture in Luke, this is what we discovered. As it says that we're keeping it in remembrance, it will then bring forth fruit, and it brings forth fruit with what? Patience. Say patience. The Greek word for patience is hupomone, which means enduring endurance under pressure. Endurance under pressure. I said enduring the pressure. And so during this pressure, you are patient, you are holding firm because you know it is soon to come. So with words of prophecy, you have to be patient with words of prophecy. All right? Let me finally say, let us not get confused, because there's always an anti to that which is genuine, authentic, and spiritual. The anti. So let me give you one anti concerning the vocal gifts, particularly with prophecy, and that is demonic oracles. We speak by the Holy Spirit. Remember I said to you before, there are three spirits. And let's just put it in this category of the vocal gifts and thus prophecy. There are three vocal entities. I'll say it like that. God can speak, the devil can speak, or you can speak. Amen. So when you go into the definition of these demonic oracles, an oracle is a person considered to provide wise, insightful counsel or prophetic predictions or precognition of the future, inspired by gods, a form of divination, according to John Waterhouse. I see it also as contemporary mediums. A medium is a person said to mediate communication between spirits of the dead and other human beings. You see? And so, Because someone is inspired to tell you about yourself or to encourage you and etc., doesn't mean that it comes from God. Now, first of all, I'm checking out your lifestyle, all right? And according to your lifestyle, I'm not trusting you to be the donkey that speaks to me. Because I know, amen, God don't need to use jackasses today to speak the truth.
That's right.
For me today. Amen. So that's the anti of prophecy. Let's go into revelation gifts. Say revelation gifts. Primarily manifested by knowing something. Knowing something. We have the word of knowledge. We have the word of wisdom. We have discerning of spirits. And then I will be ending there. The word of knowledge. You didn't get a sentence. You didn't get a paragraph. You got one word. Look at me for a moment. When I flow through the word of knowledge, I don't get a whole sentence. I don't get the whole story. God gives me one word, two words. I'm faithful to declare that, to speak that, to move in the direction of obeying that. Then here comes more. I obey that. Here comes more. I obey that. So the Lord puts me also in a tight place with my obedience of faith concerning this gift. And as I'm obeying him, it's like he's opening up the matrix of truth regarding this knowledge that comes supernaturally to this person. Are y'all hearing what I just said? And so we can go to Acts 5, 3 to 11, 1 to 5. And if you could help me with the scriptures as well, thank you. Let's go to Acts chapter 5, the word of knowledge. Verse 3, but Peter said, Ananias, why hath Satan filled thine heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back part of the price of the land? And we're going to go all the way to 11 real quick, okay? Verse 4 says, whilst it remained, was it not thine own, this property, this land? All right, because Barnabas was such a free giving spirit, and he started this whole motion, right? And he began to give, and others began to chime in as well. And so they said, well, we're going to get on the bandwagon, all right? So we don't know their reasoning other than what Peter, by the Holy Spirit, is revealing here. Was it not thine own, in thine own power? Why hast thou convinced this thing in thine heart that thou hast not lied unto men, but unto God? Verse 5. And Ananias, hearing these words, fell down, gave up the ghost, and great fear came on all them that heard these things. I think we're going to stop there. So it's not natural knowledge that Peter had. While this man, Ananias, came into his presence, he already knew it was dropped. It was a gift given to him by the Holy Spirit to reveal this man's heart, and that was the knowledge of the Holy Spirit. Particularly the word of knowledge. And there's other episodes in the Bible, Acts 9, verses 10 to 12, and we can go there as well, but we will not. The word of knowledge. Now, we're not talking about natural knowledge, which is the result of knowing, clear perception, learning information, a skill. This is not natural knowledge, okay? And you have to be careful because sometimes people trip into the natural and want to call it supernatural. No. You know, wow, Apostle, how did you know I was tired? I looked in your eyes and you looked weird. Don't play me or the Holy Ghost like, I knew something spiritual. No, you look tired. You were dragging your left foot coming into church. I already knew you were tired. It's so spiritual. No, that was natural. Natural knowledge. Y'all get what I'm saying? You understand? All right. The word of wisdom is a supernatural insight concerning God's purpose, His timing, or solution to any problem. Let's go to Acts chapter 27. Acts chapter 27. We're going to verses 31 and 34. On occasions, the Lord operates through me, a person's vocation, their school, their destiny, etc. I need you to understand that there's blendedness with gifts, all right? So at times when I'm prophesying over someone, God will drop the other gift in me, and I begin to talk about, well, you are getting ready to pursue this field in college, but the Lord is speaking this. See, so here comes His word of wisdom on behalf of that individual. It says there in Acts 27:31, Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, except these abide in the ship, you cannot be saved. Let's move on to the next verse, please. Let's go to all the way to 34. I'm sorry. Just maybe we can paint the picture a little better. We went to 31. Let's go to 32, please. Then the soldiers cut off the ropes of the boat and let her fall off. All right. Verse 33. And while the day was coming on, Paul besought them all to take meat, saying, "This day is the 14th day that you have tarried and continue fasting, having taken nothing." Verse 34. Wherefore I pray you now, take some meat, for this is for your health, for there shall not an hair fall from the head of any of you. Now it's pretty bold, isn't it? Pretty brash, pretty bold, and I love the gifts because it gives you such a confidence and emboldenment. Look at me for a moment now. If the scripture says in Acts that He will give you power from on high, is that what the scripture says in Acts? Amen. Guess what? That power also is for the gifts. So when you operate in the gifts, if fear is intimidation is trying to hinder the flow of the Spirit, you know that ain't you. That's the spirit of fear that's trying to impact the confidence of what you just said. The confidence of what you know. The confidence that when you lay hands, that the power gifts are going to be in operation. Amen. You can't talk about timid faith. There is no such thing. There's no such animal. Timid faith. No. Faith is always powerful.
Yes.
Faith is always confident. You look at faith, amen, and you study the background. It's several forms of it, of course, but let me go to pistis, P-I-S-T-I-S, all right, which means full persuasion, confidence, full assurance. That's what Strong says. Amen. I thought you were going to put that on the screen. I said, man, she's good. Amen. So there's no space for fear or timidity. Amen. So now the anti of the word of wisdom is natural wisdom, which is intelligence, keen, acute, strong-mindedness. We're not talking about this. Let me say again, we're talking about the gifts of the Holy Spirit. If I didn't say it before, let me be very clear now and say these are the gifts of the Holy Spirit, not the gifts of man. They're not natural gifts, they're supernatural gifts. They're gifts of the Holy Spirit. You can't have the operation of the gifts operate in your life if you don't have the Holy Spirit in your life. We're not talking about the saving grace and quality of the Holy Spirit. We're talking about the endowment, the empowerment, the dynamite side of the Holy Spirit that you need to have operating in your life. And according to the instruction of Scripture, how to receive the Holy Spirit in your life. Once He comes, the gifts are automatic.
Yes.
They're still out of your control. You can't push a button to start it or click it off to stop it. The Holy Spirit moves. When He moves, you move. What's going to stop you from moving? Fear. I could make a mistake. You want to know how many times I made a mistake? And I backed up in the Holy Spirit like Jeremiah was like, fire my bow, go! And I began to speak anyway. I began to lay hands anyway. So what you messed up? So what you didn't say it right, do it right. What's the overarching issue? You obeyed God. And that's what God sees. At least you obey me. Come on. Amen. You ever called your little toddler to you, right? You remember them days? Come on, baby. And then to stumble and fall forward, coming towards you. You didn't say, what is your problem? Straighten your little bow-legged self up. You need to go to weightlifting class or something. Go to therapy with your mama next week. No. It's so cute. It's so... Look at my toddler trying to come to me. So excited in coming just missed the step. Boom, fell. Jessica, you know what I'm talking about? That's the point I'm making here. I'm glad we're able to paint that picture for you. The next and the final gift is discerning of spirits. The supernatural insight from the Holy Spirit into the spirit world to detect spirits and their activities. We're talking about demon spirits, angelic spirits, a person's spirit. That's right, a person's spirit. You can detect bitterness, you can detect jealousy, you can detect some kind of generational curse or struggle that person has. All right, a discernment there. Doesn't have to, everything is not a devil, everything is not a demon. All right. Amen? Amen. Because you got a twitch, you know, and I see that devil. The Lord has given me this gift that I see that devil. No, it's not a devil, it's called a tick. Study out what that means. It's a tick. It's a nervous reaction. It's a nervous response. It is not a demon. You understand me? Sometimes we over-spiritualize things. You know, as we were ministering to a young man, and some more leaders from another church came, and we were ministering to him and praying over him, and etc. And you know, they went right into the deliverance and right into, you know, we don't cast this spirit off of you. This demonic spirit attack your mind, and so you can't think right, and you have hallucinations and all this kind of thing. I'm praying and I'm discerning. The Lord taught me years ago, stop being emotional or allow the emotions of others to grab hold of you and take you into what they're doing. Right. So now, back up, check it out, pray in the Holy Ghost. See what's going on. Go past your mind, your thoughts, what you're seeing. Go past the emotions that's emanating in and around you right now. What is it? The Lord says, chemical imbalance. Has nothing to do with a demon. Although, you know, there's something else to be said there, but I won't go there right now. Take medication. I don't know if he was taking medication. He wasn't taking his medication. So now you're acting like a screwball now. You're acting out of character, out of sorts. Are you hearing me now? Discern properly by the Spirit. Amen. Amen. It's good to have senior people around you. Good to have your spiritual leadership around you to check, you know, what is your sense? What do you agree? And we will, you know, we don't care about offending you. Because it's has to do with offense, whether you're right or wrong, or whether, you know, we allow freedom for you to be wrong or not. No, it's all about what is truth and right. Amen. Amen. Acts 16, verses 16 to 18. That's where we're going to go here. And it came to pass as we went to prayer, certain damsel possessed with the spirit of divination met us, which brought her masters much gain by soothsaying. She was in, I think, the silver trade, right? Selling images, little idols of Diana, such like, and doing that with divination. Okay, this is a spirit of witchcraft, one could say, right? And you know, kind of manipulating people. I don't know if you know folk like that. Amen. Amen. I'm not. Listen. Please understand what I'm about to say. I'm not saying all salespeople use divination. But I am perturbed. Don't follow me. Why are you following me? I said I was just looking in the department store. I'm just looking. I know you work by way of commission and all of that. All right, if I need you, what's your name? Okay, if I need you, Joseph, I'll call you. Okay? So I'm going on this rack looking, and he's on this rack messing with clothes he shouldn't mess with, looking at me. Joseph, goodbye. funny there, but you get, right? You just, the pressure, unnecessarily so. Just pressure. You can sense that entering a room, entering the church, entering somebody's house. The spirit of discernment, something ain't right, something. Amen. And we're not talking about everybody hush hush when you enter into the place. There's nothing discerning about that. You know they're probably talking about you. Ain't nothing holy about that. They just got you talking about you. You enter in, they stop talking. They begin to stutter about another subject matter. What do you think about the weather? Can I get a witness, somebody? Ain't no Holy Ghost there. No discernment. Stop that. So the opposite of discernment is natural discernment, which is to judge and to discriminate and perceive and comprehend. It is not intuition. Listen to me closely. The discerning of spirits is not clairvoyancy. You know what that is? That's extrasensory perception. The discerning, the gift to discern is not that. And when someone operates in that, it is not the Holy Ghost's gift of discernment. Okay? We have to understand that. We have to have understanding on these matters because people are duped and bamboozled and tricked and brought into some kind of working that when you look around and look at it, you find out I've been in this a while, and boy, I got myself in trouble. How do I get out of this? So we end with this, and next week we'll talk about the power gifts. But let me just end with this thought. So the question is then, how many want to flow in the gifts of the Spirit? And put your hand down. How many are already flowing in the gifts of the Spirit? Let me see your hand. You're already flowing in the gifts. All right, put your hand down. All right, those that are not flowing in the gifts of the Spirit and need to, desire to, let me see your hand. Okay, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. God bless you. All right, I need y'all to stand. Don't want to embarrass you. Just stand, because we're going to pray for you now. Okay, and you're going to listen very closely. Is there anybody else? Anybody else? Betty, is that you standing? Okay, good. All right, yeah, we need to flow. We need to flow. I would ask those that raised your hand, have you been flowing in the gifts here? And that will probably be another message. Because I ain't seen much going on here. Amen. Amen. Now look at me now. Look at me. And if you claim you do understand that the gifts of the Spirit are operating, you can't say that we're not giving you a chance to do that. Yes, there's checks and balances, but you can't say that. So it's not ignorance because you raise your hand as if you already know about certain operations of the Holy Spirit's gift. So it can't be that. Maybe it's fear, but then the third, disobedience. The Spirit can't flow and not flow on you or through you. If that happens, you're probably grieving the Holy Ghost. And that's not a good thing. I'm not suggesting every time we come together that the gift of the Spirit should flow and operate through you. But if you've been in the presence of the Lord, it ain't no problem. So maybe you need to repent. I'm serious about this thing. We can't be shucking and jiving at the 60 term. About this thing. So while you're standing, I want y'all to listen to me. And then we're going to pray a real simple prayer. We're done. I want the gift of the Spirit operating through me. Then you pray a prayer of desire for the gifts. Now you can't pick and choose. I want this one. I don't want that one, Lord. I want that one, and that one. Okay. Okay. Or Lord, I want all 9 gifts operate. You can't do that. Listen closely. You pray that the Holy Spirit would operate his gifts through you. You have a desire to do that. It says so in 1 Corinthians chapter 14. You obey the movement of the Spirit that's happening in you. I have a line that goes like this: if you don't obey, you won't play. If you don't obey, you will not play. What do you mean by play? You will not play the role of that particular gift if you do not obey. So the gifts of the Spirit operates through our obedience. You may come to the next service and say, Lord, I'm preparing myself. Maybe this is the day you'll operate through me. I am ready, Lord. You got that desire. And you're ready to obey the Lord. And then once the Spirit begins to function in you, no, even prior to that, you've heard this, buy the tape, $5, buy the CD, and study on what we've been saying. It could be that the Holy Spirit may touch you on a particular gift. Study that through Old and New Testament. Show yourself approved unto God, a workman needing not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the truth concerning this gift. All right? So this is not a freebie thing where you don't do anything. You should study the gifts. Whether it is your desire or you noticed a flow of a gift. You don't know what it is. An apostle just mentioned it. Whoa, okay, that's the word of knowledge. Let me study more on that. Got that? Focus on what God is doing in you. Cultivate it. Listen closely. Meditate on it. We're back at our memory scripture. Joshua, what? 1:8. That you meditate on this word, what? Day and night, Jessica. Day and night. Because you want God more in your life. How do you get God more in your life? By allowing him to operate through you. Wow. I said wow. And so with that in mind, let's pray. Church, let's pray for those who are standing, those who are already flowing in the gifts. Pray that the gifts would operate. Father, for those who are standing, you know their heart. They have stood with desire. They have stood in their faith. They desire the gifts of the Spirit operating. I am assuming they have already received the baptism of the Holy Ghost, speaking in other tongues as the Spirit gives utterance. Let their desire morph into study, into full-blown obedience to obey you regarding your movement, Holy Spirit. For the sake of the body of Christ. And lastly, Father, association brings assimilation as they continue to be in the company of the supernatural. Even more so, in your company, laying before you in your presence, they will become more like you and begin to flow like you flow. So we thank you for this answered prayer. We know it to be done by the authority of your name, Jesus. And the church said, amen. Amen. You can be seated. Give the word a shout, a praise, a thanksgiving, a clap. Hallelujah. Before we...
This is so important when the gospel is teaching us, because this is the church of the Lord Jesus Christ. It's not a powerless church. The church cannot be powerless. We don't go to witches or psychics or use tarot cards and believe in hoodoo and voodoo and all this crazy stuff you've seen on TV. And more people in this country and the world are getting into all kind of witchcraft.
Spiritualism.
Spiritualism, talking unto the dead. God forbids for a witch to live. You got to be in the Word. Don't let that stuff come in your house, and don't let your kids watch that mess on TV. Don't let them watch Harry Potter, and none of that stuff. We don't want to be witches or warlocks. We want to be Christians in our heart, and we want to be like Jesus. And the gateway into the realm of the Spirit is the baptism in the Holy Spirit. And when you receive the baptism, the gifts will follow. The gifts will follow. We've been speaking in tongues for more than 40 years. Still with the gifts. I'm still prophesying after 40 years. Still can prophesy. And God can use you. He has no respect to person. The only thing God has respect to is faith.
Amen. Hallelujah. Let me say this to those who are viewing before we close out. You have not received Jesus Christ yet. This is the time to receive those here under the sound of my voice. Maybe you need to rededicate your life to the Lord, or come to the Lord Jesus for the first time. He loves you. He wants to give you power to live. Why should you come to Christ? One reason: power to live this life and not allow the situations of life to overwhelm, overtake you, and destroy you. That's you today. Pray and say, Lord, I need you right now. This is your own way to be my Savior, Lord. Save me. Keep me. Be my all in all today. In Jesus' name, Father, I thank you for that. Find your church home. Read your Bible every day. Amen. Is there anyone here who's not saved? You die today, you know you'll be absent from the body to be what? Present with the Lord. You sure about that? All of y'all going to heaven? You sure of that? Because Jesus is the way. Jesus is the door. There is no other way. It's not Confucius, Buddha, it's not Allah, it's none of them. It's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Jesus Yeshua HaMashiach. God bless you. We've done what the Lord has required. We want to say, if you want to join this church, this movement, this apostolic prophetic movement, you're more than welcome to do that. If that's you today, stand and say, I want to be a part of this church. I want to be a part of what this church is all about and the teachings and the movement that's happening in God. That's you today, stand. So everyone today. All right, we've done what the Lord has required. Please stand. And we're going to have our benediction. Remember our business meeting. We have some important matters that we need to cover, and we need your help. God bless you. Lord, what we're doing today.
Benediction is found in Numbers 6, 24, 25, and 26. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. Go in peace in the name of Jesus. Thank you.
And members, we're going to meet over here. This is a meeting for members. Of course, you can greet others before they leave. Sherelle, it's good to see you.